This USAID thing that's going on, Mike Benz has been on that like a pit bull, and I've been following him on X.
Now, this is the sort of content that puts USAID in Trump and Elon Musk's sights. The White House highlighted these specific programs.
We're up against a much, actually, deeper, darker problem with this USAID scandal.
Joe Rogan recently revealed an explosive new list of powerful figures allegedly tied to the USAID scandal.
So our own government is funding this left-wing lunatic who is hiring the most insane prosecutors who are letting people out of jail who commit violent crimes.
These people directly and indirectly pulled the strings behind one of the most controversial shutdowns in American aid history.
Now we get it. Because it wasn't, otherwise it's organic. This is the will of the people. This is how people are moving. It's not. It wasn't that at all. This was all organic, and it was really about control and money.
But what exactly did they do that led to the USAID cuts? And how badly have these cuts affected the rest of the world? Buckle up, because what you're about to find out in this video is sure to blow your mind.
USAID, charging waste, fraud, and abuse at the agency. The world's richest man is leading a campaign that will cut assistance to some of the world's poorest people.
Donald Trump. First on this list is President Donald Trump. When Donald Trump returned to the White House in 2025, one of his first moves was to take a wrecking ball to the United States foreign aid system. The cuts were swift, sharp, and deeply felt, especially in Africa, where the U.S. Agency for International Development, also known as USAID, had funded thousands of life-saving projects. According to a report by the Africa Report, over 5,300 aid projects were scrapped under Trump's orders, leaving only around 900 to survive. That's a brutal 86% cut, taking the aid budget from $40 billion down to just $8.3 billion. Trump didn't just trim the edges, he wiped out entire sectors. Programs in private sector growth, higher education, and political participation were completely defunded. Others like infrastructure, civil society, family planning, and trade were slashed by more than 90%. What made it worse was how unevenly the pain was spread. 9 African countries, including Senegal, Guinea, and Morocco, lost all of their USAID support. The biggest financial hits came in places like Ethiopia, which lost $386.9 million, the Democratic Republic of Congo, with $386.7 million gone, and Uganda, which saw a staggering 66% of its aid wiped away. In South Africa, USAID support dropped by a shocking 89%, which is a loss of over $260 million. This meant fewer resources for STEM education, vocational training, and healthcare access for millions. Women's empowerment programs took a huge hit too. In Kenya, rural women's microfinance schemes were halted. In Ethiopia, women farmers were left without support. In the DRC, shelters and services for survivors of gender-based violence were slashed. Trump's administration gave little warning and even less explanation. The move seemed to fit into a broader theme of isolationism and transactional politics. If it didn't directly benefit the U.S., it wasn't worth funding. By dismantling USAID in this way, Trump didn't just withdraw funds. He yanked the rug out from under communities already working hard to rise above poverty, violence, and inequality. Now, while Trump was directly involved in making this decision, the next person on this list wasn't. Yet their actions somehow led to this decision being reached. Keep watching to find out how. Hillary Clinton. Long before Donald Trump slashed billions from USAID in 2025, a different chapter of U.S. foreign aid history was being written by Hillary Clinton. As Secretary of State from 2009 to 2013, Clinton was a strong supporter of expanding U.S. global development programs. She pushed for more funding in areas like education, women's rights, and health, especially in Africa. She also helped shape the idea that foreign aid wasn't just about charity, it was about national security and global influence. During her time, USAID got more money and attention. Clinton helped launch the Feed the Future program to fight hunger and back the Global Health Initiative, which focused on maternal health and fighting disease. She also pushed for more involvement of U.S. aid in civil society, governance, and even in local political development. To her, a stronger, more stable world meant a safer America. But not everyone liked this approach. Some conservatives believe Clinton made USAID too political. They argued that she poured U.S. tax dollars into programs that pushed values like reproductive health and democratic reform in places that weren't ready or willing to accept them. Critics claimed this values-first style of aid made America look like it was trying to control other countries instead of helping them. Clinton's deep involvement in Africa and the Middle East, especially during the Arab Spring, also stirred backlash. When Libya fell into chaos after U.S. and NATO intervention, many Republicans blamed her. Now, fast forward to Trump. When Trump took office again in 2025, he saw USAID not as a tool for diplomacy, but as a bloated program promoting agendas he didn't support. He remembered the Clinton-era expansion and blamed Democrats for using foreign aid as a global lecture tour, not a smart investment. To Trump, if foreign aid didn't bring clear benefits to America, like trade deals, loyalty, or military cooperation, it wasn't worth it. So when Trump returned to power, he didn't just cut aid for budget reasons, he cut it to erase what he saw as Clinton's legacy. Programs she once championed, like education for girls, civil society, and health, were among the first on the chopping block. Trump's team even targeted countries where Clinton had focused efforts, claiming they were ungrateful or no longer strategic allies. In a strange twist of history, Hillary Clinton's vision of generous, values-driven foreign aid helped build a structure that Trump later tore down. Her past actions gave shape to the very programs Trump wanted to destroy, which made her a key, if indirect, reason why USAID lost so much under him. Oprah Winfrey. Another person of importance that somewhat contributed to the USAID cuts is Oprah Winfrey. In 2002, Oprah founded a leadership academy for girls in South Africa, a project she had championed as a symbol of empowerment for young women in Africa. But accusations, which have yet to be confirmed soon, revealed a tangled web that would have far-reaching consequences for both Oprah and USAID. It turned out that USAID was the true funder, not Oprah. This revelation caused public shock and led to suspicions that the American government was using Oprah's name to manage its image in the region. The backlash was swift and far-reaching. Activists, educators, and journalists questioned the ethics behind allowing a celebrity to front a program with deep political and financial implications. Was it an innocent branding strategy, or part of a deliberate plan to soften the perception of American intervention in Africa? Congressional hearings were briefly held to examine the transparency of such partnerships. Meanwhile, Oprah remained largely silent, issuing only one vague statement expressing surprise and disappointment. Some supporters believed she had been used, while critics said she had willingly lent her name to a deceptive project that lacked integrity from the beginning. Local critics in South Africa argued that USAID was pushing American values onto the students, often clashing with local cultural traditions. The controversy grew as it was suggested that the funding was not only used for educational purposes, but was also funneled into consultants and management costs that did little to support the students directly. The allegations didn't stop there. There were also some reports that large sums of money intended for the academy had been diverted to consultancy firms, raising questions about how much of the aid actually made it to the intended programs. Moreover, locals accused USAID of masking corruption by associating the academy with Oprah's well-known public image, using her fame as a shield while managing funds poorly. The combination of accusations about poor living conditions at the academy and misconduct by staff only fueled the growing backlash. This scandal, with Oprah's involvement at the center, inadvertently became a major blow to USAID's reputation. The public perception of how USAID was being managed, through questionable partnerships and misuse of funds, led to calls for greater oversight and scrutiny of foreign aid programs. Critics argued that the Leadership Academy had become a symbol of everything wrong with the way U.S. foreign aid was being distributed. Oprah's connection to the scandal, although indirect, became part of the narrative that helped justify the drastic reductions in foreign aid spending and cast a shadow over the future of U.S. assistance programs globally. Elon Musk. Next on this list is a man who is now being considered President Donald Trump's right hand, especially in issues like the USAID cut. In early 2025, Elon Musk, the billionaire behind Tesla and SpaceX,
USAID, run by radical lunatics, and we're getting them out,
played a major and controversial role in the funding cuts and eventual shutdown of the USAID. While Musk is known for rockets and electric cars, few expected him to be involved in dismantling one of the world's largest aid organizations. But that's exactly what happened. Working with former President Donald Trump, Musk headed a team called the Department of Government Efficiency, a cost-cutting group that aimed to shrink what they considered bloated government agencies. Their biggest target was USAID. USAID had been the face of American foreign aid for over 60 years, running programs in over 60 countries. It helped war-torn regions like Ukraine and the Gaza Strip, supported women's health, food aid, and education in places like the Democratic Republic of Congo, and built long-standing partnerships in Africa, the Middle East, and beyond. Musk and his team accused the agency of being inefficient, overly political, and a drain on taxpayer money. They circulated internal reports, criticized public health grants, and painted USAID as outdated and irrelevant. These claims were hotly disputed, but the narrative stuck. In February, Trump and Musk started moving USAID's responsibilities to the State Department to better match the America First policy. But behind the scenes, they were planning something more drastic. By April, the final blow came. USAID's overseas offices were ordered to shut down, and layoff notices were sent to over 10,000 local workers around the world, plus more than 600 U.S. diplomats. Everyone was told their jobs would be gone by July or August. Trump's justification for these actions was that the USAID was filled with fraud and radical left lunatics. Musk went further, calling the agency criminal, though he gave no evidence. Former USAID leaders, speaking anonymously, said this was the final nail in the coffin. While Musk's tech ventures look to the future, his actions with USAID may have pushed millions backward. Aid workers lost jobs, communities lost lifelines, and America's role as a global helper dimmed. Whether driven by cost savings, ideology, or ego, Musk's hand in shutting down USAID turned a quiet corner of U.S. policy into a global earthquake, and the after effects are still being felt around the world. Apart from Musk, some other government officials also contributed to these cuts. Stick around to find out who these officials are. Jeremy Leuen. Surprisingly, Jeremy Leuen, a 28-year-old lawyer with no prior government experience, has become a very important figure in the ongoing cuts to the USAID under the Trump administration.
Jeremy Leuen as the USAID's chief operating officer. It comes amid a flurry of legal challenges against Doge.
Leuen, a tech entrepreneur, was handpicked by President Trump to join the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, a cost-cutting task force led by the billionaire Elon Musk. This task force was responsible for slashing government spending, and Leuen's involvement in dismantling USAID was part of a broader push to reduce U.S. foreign aid spending. In March 2025, Leuen's role expanded dramatically when he was promoted to both the Chief Operating Officer and Deputy Administrator for Policy and Programs at USAID. Despite only being at USAID for a month, he quickly became a driving force behind the agency's decline. As part of Musk's push to streamline U.S. government operations and shift foreign aid responsibilities to the State Department, Leuen worked tirelessly on the dissolution of USAID. Leuen's efforts didn't stop there. His quick rise within the State Department led to his appointment as the acting director of the Office of Foreign Assistance in April 2025. This office was crucial to the administration's control over U.S. foreign aid, and Leuen's role involved overseeing the transition of USAID's functions to the State Department. He took over this role after Peter Marocco was ousted from the position, further solidifying Leuen's influence on the future of U.S. foreign aid policy. Under Leuen's leadership, the cost-cutting measures intensified. Funding for key USAID programs, including humanitarian aid and global health initiatives, was severely reduced. These cuts were not limited to financial aid. Thousands of employees, including U.S. diplomats and local workers, were laid off, and more than 5,000 aid programs were abruptly terminated. The fallout from these decisions rippled across the globe, affecting vulnerable communities who relied on U.S. aid for survival. Leuen's role in orchestrating these cuts have obviously led to a lot of controversies, especially given his lack of government experience. Critics argue that his tech-driven, business-focused mindset may not be suited for getting through the difficulties associated with international aid. Yet his alignment with Musk's cost-cutting agenda has positioned him as a key figure in changing the U.S.'s approach to foreign aid, one that many believe prioritizes efficiency over humanitarian impact. Randall Tobias. Randall Tobias, who served as the head of the USAID and Director of Foreign Assistance, played a big role in changing how the U.S. gave foreign aid during the Bush administration. His leadership led to concerns that funding for long-term development projects might be cut or redirected.
Tonight, Deputy Secretary of State Randall Tobias has resigned from his job.
In 2006, Tobias was tasked with overseeing a major reform to combine USAID with the U.S. State Department. The goal of this office was to make foreign aid more organized and aligned with U.S. foreign policy. But this change also raised worries that the focus of aid would shift from helping people in need to supporting U.S. political and security interests. Tobias' plan was to merge humanitarian work with diplomacy and security goals. This meant that money for long-term projects, like building schools or providing health care, could be redirected to more immediate concerns, such as supporting military efforts or political goals in countries like Iraq and Afghanistan. But not everyone liked this idea, especially since they felt that aid for countries in Africa, Latin America, and other regions, which didn't have direct ties to U.S. politics, might suffer or even be cut. Many people worried that Tobias, with his corporate background, would focus more on efficiency and cost-cutting than on long-term development. By linking foreign aid to U.S. interests, funding that could have gone to important development projects was often used for short-term political purposes. This change made it harder for USAID to focus on long-term needs like poverty reduction or improving education and health in poorer countries. Instead of focusing solely on helping countries in need, aid became more about supporting U.S. foreign policy. As a result, some funding was taken away from traditional development programs and used for more urgent, politically motivated efforts. Although Tobias was successful in organizing foreign aid to serve U.S. interests, his approach unintentionally hurt long-term projects that were supposed to improve people's lives in the poorest parts of the world. While Tobias initially set out to do the best for USAID, his actions ended up doing more harm than good for the organization. Next up is Alan Gross, a man who had similar intentions to help USAID, but the awful way his efforts backfired in the end will shock you. Alan Gross. Alan Gross never meant to change U.S. foreign policy, but his actions, mistakes, and eventual imprisonment in Cuba triggered a political storm that led to cuts in funding for USAID and a shift in how the U.S. dealt with Cuba. Gross was hired by a USAID contractor to secretly install internet technology in Cuba, using nearly $600,000 in U.S. government funds. He smuggled banned equipment into the country and tried to set up hidden Wi-Fi networks, especially in Jewish synagogues. Gross claimed he was helping Cuban Jews connect with the world, but he didn't tell them that his work was part of a U.S. government mission. He also used American Jewish travelers as mules to sneak in the devices without their knowledge. Unfortunately, Cuban intelligence caught on quickly. Gross was arrested in 2009 during his 5th trip to the island. In his possession were flash drives with details about secret USAID programs aimed at undermining the Cuban government. Cuba sentenced him to 15 years in prison for acts against the independence of the Cuban nation. Back in Washington, Gross's arrest embarrassed USAID and caused a lot of anger in Congress. Senators like John Kerry and representatives like Howard Berman, both Democrats,
the notion that somehow dealing with climate is coming at their expense. No, it's not.
Had already been questioning the logic of spending tens of millions of dollars on these covert Cuba programs. Now, Gross' arrest gave them evidence that USAID had been reckless. The situation raised big questions like why the USAID funded secret missions in Cuba that could endanger lives and why were millions being spent on programs that hadn't produced real results. In a 2010 letter, Kerry and Berman criticized USAID, saying over $150 million had been spent on Cuba without meaningful change. They accused the agency of using dangerous, outdated tactics. The embarrassment from Gross's arrest helped them push to cut funding for these types of operations. Under President Obama, funding was reduced, and eventually Gross's release became part of a broader deal to improve U.S.-Cuba relations. So while Alan Gross didn't plan to start a shift in U.S. foreign policy, his failed secret mission ended up doing just that. By exposing USAID's hidden work and triggering backlash in Congress, he indirectly led to the fund cuts the USAID witnessed today. Marco Rubio. While Marco Rubio didn't start the fire that led to 83% of all the work the USAID has done being wiped out, he definitely helped fan the flames. As was mentioned earlier in this video, after Donald Trump returned to power, one of his first moves in January was to freeze all foreign aid. He said too much money was being wasted on globalist projects that didn't help America. That opened the door for a brutal review. And standing right at that door was Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Together with Elon Musk, Trump and Rubio led what Rubio proudly called a historic reform. In a post on X, formerly called Twitter, Rubio announced that 5,200 USAID programs were terminated.
USAID has a history of sort of ignoring that and deciding that there's somehow a global charity separate from the national interest. These are taxpayer dollars.
Only about 1,000 survived, and those were handed off to the State Department, where Rubio had more control. He said these changes would finally put American interests first. Health officials inside USAID sent urgent messages to Rubio saying that if the cuts went through, up to 166,000 people could die from malaria, 200,000 kids could be paralyzed by polio, and 1 million children could suffer from severe malnutrition. Rubio and his team pushed ahead anyway. The cuts hit everything from clean water projects in Sudan to emergency food for kids in war zones. Even programs Rubio had promised to protect got the axe. The aid world was stunned. Lawsuits were filed, diplomats were furious, aid workers lost their jobs, and contractors were left hanging, unpaid. So why did Rubio do it? He believed most of these programs didn't help the U.S. directly. He argued that foreign aid should only serve a narrow version of the national interest. Marco Rubio didn't hit the delete button on every program himself, but he didn't have to. By backing the plan, working closely with Musk, and making the final announcement, Rubio helped shut down decades of humanitarian work in record time. The result was a smaller, colder version of America's presence in the world, and a legacy Rubio may carry for a long time. Bill Gates. Strangely enough, Elon and Oprah aren't the only billionaires on this list that have some ties with the USAID. Bill Gates does too. As the United States slashed foreign aid programs like never before, one name kept popping up: Bill Gates. Oddly enough, he wasn't the one calling for cuts. He was the one begging for them to stop. But his deep ties to USAID may have helped light the fuse he later tried to snuff out. Gates' involvement with USAID did not start now. For over 25 years, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation worked closely with USAID. Together, they funded huge global health projects, vaccine rollouts, food programs, and even controversial birth control initiatives across Africa and Asia. It looked like philanthropy, but critics say it was more than that. They believe that Gates did all this work to help build his influence. Gates helped launch or heavily fund organizations like Gavi, CPI, and AGRA, often alongside USAID. These weren't small efforts. They shaped vaccine policies, food systems, and disease response plans in dozens of countries. But some of these partnerships stirred backlash. For instance, the HPV vaccine program in India around 2009, which were backed by Gavi and USAID, led to serious health complaints, including paralysis and even deaths. Investigations followed. Gates and USAID denied wrongdoing, but the damage to public trust did not go away. Then came COVID-19 and the billions in pandemic relief. Some of that money, as leaked in 2022, reportedly went to reproductive health programs in Africa, including birth control and sterilization efforts, again funded by Gates-backed groups working with USAID. Critics asked, was pandemic money being used to push other agendas? Gates also pushed agricultural changes through USAID, backing genetically modified seeds and chemical-heavy farming. His AGRA program was supposed to help African farmers, but a 2022 report showed it mostly helped agribusinesses, not small farms. Farmers became more dependent on seeds and chemicals they couldn't afford without aid. To many, it looked like USAID wasn't just doing humanitarian work, it was helping roll out Gates' version of development, one that critics called top-down, corporate-heavy, and poorly suited for local needs. And then, the cuts came. When Trump returned to the White House and claimed that the USAID was woke and wasteful, Gates rushed to defend the agency. He warned that cutting it could cost millions of lives, but that plea backfired. Some in Trump's camp saw Gates' reaction as proof that USAID had been hijacked by elites. Marco Rubio, now Secretary of State, moved fast. Alongside Elon Musk's efficiency task force, he helped cut nearly all USAID's programs in just 6 weeks. Gates wasn't the cause of the cuts, but years of cozy deals, controversial projects, and top-down decision-making made USAID an easy target. Gates had turned it into a powerful tool for global influence. That influence, critics argued, was exactly what needed to be dismantled. Ironically, the man who tried to save USAID may have helped dig its grave, simply by making it too big, too powerful, and too closely tied to his own vision of saving the world. While Gates' connection to USAID isn't surprising, the last person's link to the foreign aid agency is sure to blow your mind. Leonardo DiCaprio. In a story almost too wild to believe, Leonardo DiCaprio, the Hollywood heartthrob known for his Oscar-winning performances in environmental activism, found himself testifying in a federal courtroom. And while he wasn't on trial, his connection to a global corruption scandal involving Malaysian money, hip-hop, and U.S. politics became an unexpected link in a chain of events that would, years later, influence how much foreign aid the United States gives to the world, including through USAID. Let's rewind to the early 2010s. Leonardo DiCaprio met a flashy Malaysian businessman named Joe Low at a glitzy Las Vegas party in 2010. Low was known for throwing wild, star-studded events, think private jets, yachts, champagne waterfalls, and VIP tables at the world's biggest events. DiCaprio thought Low was just another rich investor. They became friends. Low even donated to DiCaprio's charity and later financed The Wolf of Wall Street, a film that was ironically about greed, corruption, and excess. But what DiCaprio didn't know at the time was that Joe Low wasn't a regular businessman. He was the mastermind behind one of the world's biggest financial scandals, the 1MDB scandal, where billions were stolen from a Malaysian investment fund. Low allegedly used stolen money to finance Hollywood movies, buy mansions, yachts, and even to influence American politics. This is where it gets political. In 2012, prosecutors say Joe Low funneled over $21.6 million to Prakazral Pras Michel, a member of the hip-hop group The Fugees. That money was then illegally funneled into Barack Obama's re-election campaign through a network of fake donors. DiCaprio recalled Low mentioning in a casual conversation that he wanted to make a big donation, around $20 to $30 million to Obama's campaign. DiCaprio testified about this in court in April 2023. Pras Michel was later accused of helping Low hide his money trail and trying to use more stolen cash to influence the Trump administration to stop investigating Low. Now, where does USAID come in? Years after the scandal first broke, this tangled web of foreign influence, shady donations, and high-profile celebrities led to a broader political backlash in the U.S. politicians, especially those who already viewed foreign spending with suspicion, started using the 1MDB case to argue that foreign money could corrupt American democracy. They pointed to the fact that stolen Malaysian funds had gone to U.S. political campaigns, Hollywood movies, and even charities. Some began asking, if this could happen under our noses, should we really be sending so much taxpayer money overseas? By 2023 and 2024, this growing skepticism led to actual consequences. Foreign aid budgets, including USAID's, came under fire in Congress. Lawmakers argued that the system was too vulnerable to abuse and that the U.S. needed to focus more on domestic issues. In budget proposals and policy debates, aid to developing countries was slashed or frozen, often with vague references to foreign corruption and accountability. Leonardo DiCaprio, of course, didn't steal any money or intend to get involved in politics, but his connection to Joe Low and his testimony about those casual conversations helped put a global spotlight on how easily foreign money could seep into America's institutions. That spotlight made politicians nervous. Nervous politicians made deep cuts, and USAID, which helps fight poverty, disease, and disasters around the world, got caught in the crossfire. So while DiCaprio didn't pull any funding strings himself, his unexpected role in exposing a larger, darker system made him an indirect player in a real-world political drama that stretched from Hollywood to Capitol Hill and reached into the lives of millions, depending on foreign aid. Sometimes even Oscar winners can't see the plot twist coming. Well, which one of these people do you think played the biggest role in getting the USAID funding cut? Let us know in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the following video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.